Hey guys, welcome to our new Wednesday show. And yeah, surprise! I was saying beforehand, oh my God, we got a face reveal. This is the famous or infamous Z-Man. Everyone is wanting to know because I met you. Well, I read Z-Man forever, and I encourage you guys to check out his blog, Z-Man blog. What's the name of the blog again? The official name where they
ZMAN,
can go to?
the ZMAN.com, THZMAN.com.
And I have to say, honestly, it's like every day, first thing in the morning, I read your blog. I love it. And then every Friday, I listen to your podcast. And I first met, though, Z Man at American Renaissance, I think last November. And after the speeches, we got together at the after party. Man, we just spoke like an hour and a half, 2 hours. It was great. And he's younger than me, but we're kind of in the same generation. We see the same way, I think, in a lot of ways. And you've been in the business world. We're actually commentators that have worked for a living. I know that's really wild. It's kind of rare. But I said, yeah, we got to have him on. So I didn't know what to call the show. So I said, well, what the heck? I'll have Grok figure this out because it knows AI, right? So they said, Grok suggested, how about the Wednesday wrap up? I'm like, okay. And I said, well, make a logo. And they made the logo. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. So AI one day, I think when they come out with Grok 4, I don't even think we'll have to be on Z-Man. They'll have our
Yeah.
images and they'll do the show for us because they know how we think. So we can, yeah, that's going to be great.
Hey,
uh,
I saw a demo. Speaking of which, we've got other stuff to talk about, but I had two demos recently on AI. One was they completely swapped out someone for a character in a movie. They took the movie and they replaced the character, and it looked just like the character wasn't a real human. It was a computer generated person for the real actor, and it looked perfect. It was flawless. No six fingers, none of that stuff. But the really
right.
creepy one was that the company I'm working with, I do some consulting with, they wanted to have a bunch of like help videos. And so they went to use one of the AI tools, and they created dialogues between two people who are like they're in an office. Hey, how do I post this accounts payable item? And the person says, well, you do this, this, and this, and this, and walk them through it. It took them about an hour to do all of these things, which would have taken months for people to record, and they did it
Right.
in a few hours, and they were completely convincing. It sounded conversational, and all they really did is just prompt the AI to say, well, make the person a woman, make it younger, that kind of thing, and really quite remarkable. Kind of terrifying though. I mean, because think about what you can do with that.
I'm a huge believer now. Like I told my audience, I post on Substack, and had some weird error, and I couldn't find the documentation on Substack. So I go, well, what the hell? I'll ask Grok, and it knew. It said, oh yeah, this is how you fix it. And I'm like, what the hell? So it is. I am a believer, and it is pretty incredible. And guys, thank you. We do this on Wednesday nights, and I will split all the super chat or rants that you send in. So if you love what we're doing, please show some love tonight. Rumble has rants, super chats has YouTube's, and I mean super chats. YouTube has super chats. You got me flustered. And then power chats below. You can send them in, and we will definitely get to it. So thank you very much for that. And we decided how to break up the show. And we thought we'd do like a half hour on foreign affairs, half hour domestics. I thought we'd kick off foreign affairs. And where's Zelenskyy going to be a year from now?
I think I predicted he'd be dead, so I'm going to stick with that. It's weird. I actually about in 2022 I wrote a tacky piece saying he's going to end up like the South Vietnamese ruler named Diem, who was really nothing wrong with him per se. It's just he became a problem, and everybody saw him as a problem and said, for whatever reason, we got to remove this guy. And the Kennedys signed off on a coup. The locals decided, let's not get bogged down in details, and they just killed him and his brother. And of course, it changed the whole shape of the war and everything else. But I thought, it's very similar because Zelenskyy is only useful as long as the Russians are not winning, the money keeps flowing, and the government of the United States doesn't change in any way. Well, that's just wasn't going to happen. At some point, the Russians would overcome their own internal difficulties and begin to ramp up for the war, beating back the Ukrainians, and we have elections. I wasn't at the time confident that Trump would win, but it was a possibility. And eventually you run out of money. We were already running out of weapons by 2023. It's not like, we could keep giving them stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be dead. I don't think he can live through it because, you can see what the Trump people are doing. I'm impressed with Trump's handling of this stuff. He keeps baiting Zelensky. He does this stuff like when they sent who was it? The Treasury guy. Trump says, "Hey, not Kellogg, the other guy, the Treasury guy, Benson, I think his name is."
Mm-hmm.
So Trump says, "Hey, you know what? We put all this money in there. We want some collateral. How about their minerals, their spices and all that stuff." And Zelensky, like an idiot, says, "Oh, sure, I'll be happy to do this." So they send the Treasury Secretary over the letter, say, "Oh, you're going to sign it all over to us." And of course, he can't do it. And he just keeps doing it. Now Zelensky's saying bad shit about Trump. I just, before we got on here, I was looking at Vance actually tweeted something saying Zelensky's going to regret giving Trump the business. I mean, so it's all over for him. He's doomed.
Well, I've noticed with Trump, I've never met the guy, but he seems to be a guy that doesn't like to be insulted. And I think Putin is pretty smart with that. They always are praising Trump, and Zelensky is acting like an idiot. And the verbiage that Trump has been saying about Zelensky, I don't know how. Well, they can forget about getting any more aid from the United States. He's called Zelensky a dictator, that he's kind of stupid. It's just been amazing what he has said about Zelensky. And I don't see a path forward with Zelensky right now. And Europe has been exposed. And when Pete Hegseth went over there, gave them the business, and J.D. Vance kind of spoke to them about how they've lost their values and they're weak. Like the British Army, what are they going to do? They have maybe a division. I think it's really exposing the weakness of Europe. And I think this whole negotiation is bigger, and you brought this up in your blog, and you're 100% right. It's just not about ending the Ukrainian war. It's resetting how Trump views the world with Russia and China, and sadly, Europe's become an afterthought. But I think we're seeing a big realignment happening, and if Europe doesn't like it, well, too bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I have to say, and it's one of those things I thought about, I want to remember to say at some point in the show before I forget. And that is, I'm in a funny place right now. Someone actually pointed this out to me. They said, a year ago, you said things fully expecting them to never happen, or at least not live long enough to see them happening. Now I'm sitting here watching them happen, and it's like, holy smokes, what in the world's going on here? I mean, a year ago, no one thought that we were going to see the reorganization of the world around civilizations. You're going to have Eurasia that'll largely be dominated by Russia, and the Chinese will have East Asia, and the United States, the New World. It just didn't. It seemed like the right way to do things, but it didn't seem like there was any momentum in that direction. And all of a sudden, now here comes Trump, just blasting through. Because look, the readouts from the Russians and the American side in Saudi Arabia made very clear that Ukraine was a tiny portion of the discussion. Basically, they said, the Russians said, "Hey, look, they already agreed that we have a point of view and they're willing to look at things through our point of view. That's great, and that'll allow us to move forward." That's pretty much what was the extent of it. The other 99% of it was sovereign wealth fund, because the Russians sent their sovereign wealth fund guy there. That was a really interesting thing. Trump sent Witkoff. Witkoff he's the guy. He's the hitter. He's Luca Brasi. He's the guy. Yeah. He's the guy who puts the gun to your head and says, "We either get your signature or your brains on this piece of paper."
Yeah, exactly. And Kellogg was the guy they just sent to take care of the girl boss, Ursula exactly. Or whatever. And that was so ridiculous when they were meeting in Riyadh, and then Macron, well, we're going to have our own summit. And they had that little thing in Paris, and as someone made a quip, it looked like the kiddies table at Thanksgiving. And they couldn't even get united because Starmer, he had this bizarre idea of sending European troops into Ukraine, which Russia said, no way, that's not going to happen. And the United States said, we're not giving you any security guarantee. So it's not Article 5. If you send troops in there, you get shot at. It's up to you. And it was just a joke. And Germany says, like, no way, we're out of it. We're not going to be sending troops. And Poland did. So the whole thing fell apart so quickly. It was just a fiasco. And Europe really looks in disarray at this point. And it's fun to see just how quickly it's changed. And I agree with you. I really think the change with this administration versus his first time is he's got people like Elon Musk and JD Vance. He's got really smart people this time that sort of understand the score and the snakes and how the deep state or the blob operates. And they're moving so damn fast. It's like the opposition is having troubles catching up to what they're doing. And not just, we'll get into domestic policy, but even foreign policy. He just keeps on going. He's setting up talks immediately. And I thought Trump had a good idea because Zelenskyy was whining, oh, we want to be part of this. And Trump said, well, you had 3 years. What were you doing for 3 years? What the hell were you doing here exactly? And, in fact, I think Zelenskyy passed something in the Constitution where no one can negotiate with Russia. Well, there you go. I mean, if you can't talk to your enemy. But part of the issue, I think, what happened is everything became this huge morality play. And my whole life, they keep trying to, it's always 1939 or 1938 in Munich. And, always enemies, mustache man that wants to take over the world. And any sort of negotiation is Chamberlain and appeasement. And that is just so immature. But this is really what we get. And I know you bring this up a lot on your blog, and you're 100% right. It's the difference between serious men. When I saw, and there were men, by the way, in negotiations with the Russians, that was so refreshing to see. They weren't crying on TikTok videos. They weren't acting like the little bitches in Europe. Did you see that guy actually crying in Europe? Because
that look, I struggle a little bit because I'm of the age you and I are about the same age, and the world for manly the way men are supposed to act really kind of changed just after we came into adulthood. It started changing, and so we're when I grew up, I was told that men don't cry in public. Yeah, you get sad and all that stuff, but there's a private place for that. Men have to look tough, not tough in a fighty sort of way, but dependable. People count on you. And like most men our age or older, they can count on one hand how many times, and it's like your father's funeral, your mother's funeral,
exactly.
Those are things that happen, right? I can't imagine standing up in front of him and giving a speech and start crying like that. I mean, even if it was my father's funeral, I wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? I would say I can't give the speech, and I would go, have a moment. It's just, it's just shocking to me. And it's not, again. I just don't understand why anybody would do that. I don't know how a man would sit there and watch this. Have you ever been around a man who cries? It's
very uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. And that European guy, he was up there crying because of what JD Vance said, mean things about Zelenskyy or something. I'm like, am I seeing this right? And it's embarrassing. And I think my hope is, because the United States, for good or bad, we tend to be the trend center. And we brought in a lot of this woke bullshit across the world, sadly. And I think Europe and Canada is always a little behind us. And I don't know what happened. This is an interesting thing that happened in the psyche. It's almost cultural. It's not just Trump. But something happened last year. I noticed it around June because I was, okay, here comes the whole homosexual flag thing every June. It wasn't as much. And I started to see people started to really turn on this whole woke thing. And we saw that in the election. The Democrats were still running on men in sundresses. And that just did not resonate with a lot of normal people that otherwise would vote Democrat. And so I think there's been a change. The cool kids call it the vibe, but there is a different vibe now. And we can see this, and I think Europe is shocked because they're still in the old way of thinking.
Yeah, I was watching that Munich thing. I kept thinking about, it's like a gag, that you see it in commercials or whatever, where somebody gets invited to it, they think is a costume party, and it's in fact a formal, so they show up dressed as Bozo the Clown or a gorilla or something. Everybody's in tuxedos. Well, that happened to the Europeans. The Europeans have been coming to this party, this where they all dress up and pretend to be these really emotional and pathetic sort of people. and then they show up at the party and it's a bunch of buff dudes, and they don't know what to do about it. Like, well, you didn't tell. I think they're really offended mostly, and they're most hysterical by the fact that no one called them up and said, "Hey guys, the vibe shifted. We're not doing it anymore." I mean, and a lot of complaints are that no one told. It kept saying that no one told us. We're like, well, that's just the way it goes, But see, that's the thing with Trump. What he's doing here. And there was a clue, and I cannot for the life of me understand why people didn't pick up on this, because I know a lot of people talked about it. The whole Israel deal. He wasn't even president yet. He sends Witkoff over there and says, this is going to be the deal. Witkoff shows up on Saturday at Bibi Netanyahu's office, calls him up and says, get your ass in here. And Netanyahu says, but it's the Sabbath. I don't care. They showed up. They signed the deal. And they got the peace agreement. Biden's still in the White House, for goodness sakes. And I looked at that and I go, okay, we're in a different world now. This is a very different thing. I don't know what this means, but it's a different world. And now you see it. He put Zelenskyy in his place. Look, you're just, he's treating Zelenskyy. If you were in the corporate world,
yeah.
And when a new boss comes in, one of the things he'll always do is establish his dominance. So that person who might have thought, maybe they pushed around the old guy, the old manager or whatever, new manager comes in, puts them in their place. He did that to Zelenskyy. He did that to all these people. And the big boys table is China, Russia, the United States, probably India. Because here's a thing that Trump does. If you visit with Trump and he holds the chair for you as you sit down, he respects you. He did it for what's his name? The Modi, the Indian guy. Yeah. He did it for who was the other guy he just did this for?
Netanyahu.
Yeah, Netanyahu. And Trump has people he respects, and he'll treat them as equals. And it's not anybody in Europe. And that's because the new world is going to be, I've compared it to the chancery courts. Back in the medieval times, they had these special courts basically where the elites worked out their differences. And they also worked out how they were going to impose new rules on the peasantry. The common law courts were for commoners. The chancery courts were for the elites. We still have it in Delaware. The chancery court in Delaware only does corporate stuff. You go in there. Musk has been in these courts a bunch of times. Shareholders are mad, whatever, and this courts just handle that kind of work. And that's what we're getting. The United States, in Trump's imagination, will be the chief justice of the global chancery court. Russia, China, India, maybe Brazil, the big players who have money and have resources, they have their own zones of area they will be responsible for, kind of like district courts. And then when it interferes, the bigger court will come together to settle bigger issues. And that ain't going to include Germany and all this. Because look, how long is it before Trump starts talking about getting rid of the UN?
Yeah. And it is amazing. And you talk about the corporate buyout. And I don't quite understand Zelenskyy. I try to, but I really don't, because he's a carny, right? That was his background. He was as you called it, a carny. I always use that term. He was a comedian or whatever. And I could see his days are limited. And if he had any sense, he would say, okay, I understand I don't have the support. I'm going to step down. I'm going to pass the baton or do something like that. But I think he's too stupid to do that. And it's not going to end well for him.
He was in the UAE because UAE, a Russian guy pointed this out to me. He said, the UAE is a place that Russians will go and put money. Chinese will put money because they have special weird laws where they'll allow a foreigner to set up a fake company and then invest in it and as a fee and all that. Well, that was where Zelenskyy and his wife were this week before they turned up in Saudi Arabia. And my guess is that's the escape route. Because at some point, think about it, is that I'm pretty sure Vance gave him the best deal he's going to get, and he turned it down. So, I keep posting that clip from The Godfather where he talks about how his father, got the singer. His contract was a $10,000 buyout, and the guy wouldn't take it. So then come would have put a gun to his head, and it's $1,000 buyout. Well, that's what's happening.
Yeah,
that's Zelenskyy.
Yeah, I get a lot of, and I'm not saying this critical of Trump, but a lot of like Godfather vibes. And as you brought up, and I've used it because I've seen this, when someone's giving someone money, and then all of a sudden they say, hey, I'd like to look at the books, see really what's going on here. And you see Elon Musk, his next task is look at what exactly has happened with our tax money, billions of dollars. How much, we don't know. But Zelenskyy said he didn't get half of it. They don't know where half of it went. And that's a little red flag there. Something is fishy.
Yeah, it's never good when somebody asks you, "Where's the money?" That is never a good question. They're not asking
Yes.
because they're happy with what's the result. But the best part is that I go back with Zelenskyy. I can't believe these guys didn't figure this out. About 2 years ago, maybe it was 2023, something like that. He was in New York, and his wife goes on $1 million shopping spree.
Yes.
And you know what I thought about? I thought about a time where a friend of mine who was in some trouble. He had some money problems. He was between jobs, and he borrowed $500 from me. The next time I saw him, he had a new suit. And all I can think of is that if you asked me to buy you a suit, I wouldn't have had a problem with it. But, I give you $500. I'm thinking you're buying food or you're paying your rent.
Right.
You buy a suit. And, it automatically it became a problem. And that's what Zelenskyy, I'm thinking, how is it they're not thinking of it? But you know what? It's not their money. They don't think of it that way. Trump thinks of it as his money. I mean, you can be sure he wants the $250 billion back somehow or other. He's thinking about getting that money back. And there's been talk that maybe the Russian frozen assets that are sitting in these in the Euroclear bank, that they're part of the deal is the Russians will say, "Look, we know you guys lost a lot of money. We lost some money. But how about this? We'll throw the $250 billion into the kitty there. That way you feel a little better. We feel a little better." And then Trump could say, I got our money back. I got to win.
Yeah, I definitely, I do think, I think the final settlement, there may be, because of the minerals, my understanding, that we want from Ukraine are controlled by Russia, and Russia's not giving that territory back up.
Oh, yeah, the lithium mines are all under Russian soldiers' feet right now.
Yeah, so if anything, we're just getting it back from Russia. I think it was just more of a way to sort of shake up Trump in many ways. He on a level, he looks kind of foolish at times, like what the hell he's thinking. You've seen his post, and I joke about he's got like this random boomer thing where he makes misspellings and random capitalizations. I have no idea why he does it, but he does it. And so he comes across as maybe not serious, but I think he has a method to his madness. I really do. He's a pretty sharp guy. And he does a lot of things to throw people off the scent. And I think part of that was the mineral thing, was to tell Ukraine, hey, we're getting serious now about our money. Like, where's our money? And even there's supposedly been a questionnaire going around to the Europeans, like what size peace force could you contribute or something. And I don't think there's that we're not going to have a peace force there. I think that's just to show the Europeans that, you can't really help. What are you talking about? And so I think he's pretty clever in how he does that. And J.D. Vance is a very clever man. And how he spoke to the Europeans was, in many ways, I thought he was like channeling some of the stuff I've done. It's like, my God, how he's just talking about these issues of free speech and tyranny in Europe and how they cancel elections. And it really butthurt the Europeans. And it was a glorious thing to see. But it's really clear now that Trump, I think, and he wants, my prediction, what Europe or Zelenskyy decides is not that relevant. Trump is going to normalize relations with Russia. Ukraine's just a part of it. And if Europe wants to do something on their own in Ukraine, we'll have fun. We're not going to backdrop it. But we know that they don't have any troops, because what little weapons they had, they gave to Ukraine. I heard this guy do an analysis of the British Army. It's a joke. It's a joke. I mean, it's like one division and most of their weapons are gone. Germany, they don't have anything. So what are they exactly going to do without America? They can talk tough, but I think Pete Hegseth says something like, well, you guys can talk tough, you can make all these proclamations, but really what matters in this world are tanks, bullets, drones. And if you don't have those things, doing a TikTok video and crying, okay, that's nice, but that's not going to really change anything.
Yeah, Mal was right. Politics comes out of, was it politics comes out of the bower of a gun, something like that,
Yeah, it really does. So,
I did an analysis. This is 20, when did Macron started talking about sending troops in? I guess it was 2023. And I just got curious and come to find out that the French government has like all this stuff on the internet. You can look up actually what their military is composed of. It was around when they had a bunch of legionnaires in a building, and Macron was starting to talk about, we're going to put more troops in or whatever. And the Russians blew the building up and killed every one of these guys, right? And they sent a message. I mean, they were like, look, we knew they were there. we told you about this, and now you've been warned. And Macron had a coronary, and because I mean, it's hard to hide a body. They got to go tell somebody's parents that, hey, your son you didn't know was in Ukraine while he died somewhere. And so I went and started looking into this stuff. I figured out that with basically the equipment that the French website said that they had, French government website, the equipment, the men, the training, and all that stuff, they could put a force of a maximum of 20,000 men into Ukraine, which would last about a month before that unit was no longer able to be combat effective because of the attrition. Because they don't have things like drones, they don't have the stuff for this fighting. It said they would just be getting clobbered. Well, I mean, a month. I mean, the Ukrainians. I mean, God love them. I mean, they are heroically courageous fighters, but they probably lost 500,000 men. I mean, that's an enormous number. There's no way in hell the Europeans would suffer those kind of losses. Just wouldn't. I mean, the European public wouldn't put up with it. There'd be riots in the streets. Because I mean, the Muslims. Because look, the people forget, like with the French, they're young people. Not all of them, but probably 40% are not French.
Right,
they're Africans and all that stuff. But they're not going to go fight and die. So, because they have the same problem. You ever look up? You can actually every once in a while find some statistics on the racial makeup, the ethnic makeups of European armies. It's the same stuff we have here. It's all white guys. There's no Muslims. There's no new Frenchmen or new Germans. It's all the old stuff.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be Trump's approach. Is they're going to negotiate a deal. Do you think Europe will come in line, or will they resist any deal that Trump makes with Putin, or will it really matter?
Kaya Kallas, the MILF that is like the EU's foreign minister now. She used to be the prime minister of Estonia. And the county I live in has probably got the county sheriff's department probably has a stronger military presence than the Estonian army. But
yeah, seriously,
she's yeah. And but anyway, she made a point. Sometimes the dumbest ones sometimes see things. She said it looks as if Trump is picking a fight with all of us, and he is. He's picking a fight with all of them, because I think what the final deal for Ukraine will be is that, look, here's the deal, Zelenskyy. If you want to live, this is how it's going to be. You abdicate, we'll have new elections. We're going to make sure the guy who wins signs the deal that we want him to sign. That deal is going to give all the mineral rights to American companies. They're not going to be a lot, but but most likely American mining companies will be able to make deals with the Russians. That'll be part of the global deal. Because people forget, we have still have big energy projects with the Russians. That pumping station that the Ukrainians attacked in Kazakhstan, that's half owned by the United States. I think 30% by the Kazakhs and the rest by the Russians. So we've got a lot of projects like this. We have a project in the North Pole that we actually quietly work together on. So I think that's what will happen. And the Europeans will just be cut out of all of it. And I wouldn't be surprised if NATO, there's serious talk by the end of the year of just the end of NATO, that it reforms, right, just becomes a European, based system. But here's the wild card while we're talking about foreign policy. Here's the one that I think that I keep thinking about. That Witkoff deal, when he went to Israel and Bibi fell in line, then Trump afterwards said something along the lines of, the ultimate goal is to normalize relations with Iran, but they'll have to do certain things for that to happen. And I kept thinking about that, because you think about it, if you could normalize relations with Iran, which means Iran would have to agree that, they're not going to attack Israel and that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, the world changes, because Israel doesn't have any enemies left. Syria's not a problem. Iraq's gone. Iran would be gone. The Saudis don't care. All of a sudden, the Israel lobby will be out of work, which would be a very interesting world. I have this dream of Trump going to Iran to give a speech to the Iranian parliament in 2028 or something, something like that, Yeah. Look, we've been at war with Iran since the 1970s. I was not. See, when I went to the hostage thing, was that 78?
Oh, I was under Carter, because I remember. I don't know if you remember, they had a song based on the Beach Boys, "Bomb, Bomb, 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 Iran." Remember that?
So I wasn't driving. I may not even hit puberty yet. So I mean, and I'm an old man now. So so for almost an entire, for two medieval people's lifetime, we've been at war with Iran. I mean, it is time to kind of call, the 70s are over now,
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Okay, in foreign policy, quickly, it's more than just obviously Russia. A couple of thoughts. People are saying that this is just a ploy that we can focus on China. China's a real enemy, but I don't. I don't really get that. Do you see Trump trying to pick a fight with China over Taiwan? I don't really think so. Everyone's predicting Taiwan. They have a the Chinese have this weird concept. It's all like face saving. It's really bizarre. The official position is Taiwan is one China, and it's really theirs, but everyone knows it's not. And as long as you pretend it's theirs, that they're okay with it. And but I don't see China invading that anytime soon. I think just they feel in the long term they will just naturally get it. What are your thoughts? Do you think China's going to be an enemy or blow up after Russia?
No, I think Trump. One of the things Trump said somewhere, it said so much. But he made. I think he called. He invited Xi to his inaugural. That's what
Hmm.
it was. And he had called him and said, and he said that he had told Xi that together we can do many great things.
Yeah.
And that to me said that that he wants to make a deal. And look, the Chinese like Trump. They actually like doing business with Trump. People think that Trump was really tough on the Chinese. The Chinese respected him for
Hmm.
his change in trade policy and stuff. They said, "Hey, this guy, he's standing up for his people." They respect that. And I think the Chinese are funny about Taiwan. It's kind of like it's one of those things. Yeah, emotionally it belongs to China and all this stuff. But as a practical matter, it being a neutral island works out pretty well for them. It allows them to
Right.
do a lot of good things. What they don't want is it turning into a fortress where the United States puts all these weapons and all the other stuff. That's what they don't want, and that's an easy deal to make. Because look,
Yeah.
everybody wants
They
to do
don't want
business
they
with
don't want they don't want Taiwan to be their Ukraine. Is
yeah,
basically what it comes down to.
yeah, and look, Trump. Like I think all the rich guys, and this is probably a good segue into the domestic stuff. But I think the reason that Trump has got all these rich guys behind him is that they understand that the finances of the United States are a disaster. They're worse than they're telling us. There's bigger problems than they're telling us. We've got look, all the boomers are retiring, all these old guys. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of problems, and they understand this. And we need to go back to being business again. Everybody needs to be making money again because that's the only way that's going to solve this problem. You look, it's the old business thing. I remember being in many meetings in my life where you're having problems, and somebody says, you can only cut to zero. We either get more sales or we go out of business. That's it.
Right.
And that's America
Yeah.
right now. We can only cut so much.
I keep going back to The Godfather, and I'm not saying Trump's a mafia figure, but it's almost like he's one of the five families and saying, "Hey, all this war that we're having between the families is bad for business. We gotta settle this out. It's not good for business." And Trump always puts everything in dollars and cents. He doesn't so much put things in terms of morality. It's very interesting. Every once in a while he will, but in general, it's what's good for America financially. And I think that's really refreshing. And before we turn to domestic policy, I mean, there's so much we could talk about foreign that we can even scratch. But uh, is uh, is Canada going to become a 51st state? Was he bullshitting or was he serious? And what about Greenland?
See, I can see Greenland. I think that I
Yeah, I
think
could
that
too. Well, in
I mean,
Greenland, I looked it up. I didn't even know there's fewer people in Greenland than in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And Fayetteville's like 90,000 people. Greenland, it's just like 56,000 Eskimos, basically.
and most of them are drunks. They're alcoholics.
Well, they're on welfare. Yeah, you could buy them off
Yeah,
easy. Yeah.
exactly. And the thing about it is that there is resources there, but really what Greenland will provide, and this is where you notice that Trump is very smart. He's doing deals with Russia, understanding that the next great sort of gold rush is in the North Pole, in the Arctic, right?
Yes.
Greenland will give us access to it. Canada gives us access to it.
Yes.
We're not gonna acquire Canada, but what we're gonna do is Canadians are gonna knuckle under so
Hmm.
that we can get easy access to the Arctic, and that's what's going on. I mean, these are the kinds of moves of a guy who really is. God help me for saying this, who's actually playing 4D chess. I mean, this is the guy looking 4 or 5 moves down the line and saying, what's the world going to look like in 20 years? And if what we need is we need Greenland, we need this, because it's funny, Greenland used to be frozen cold, but thank goodness global warming has made Greenland green again. So it's not like it's useless land. And it's. I wouldn't live there. Well, I don't know. I might. The nice thing about living there is I don't have to worry about anybody ever knocking on my door. But, but still, I think, Canada's. I think what he's doing to Canada is he's just slapping them around until they come to their senses. I really think that's what's going on here.
Yeah, I think so too. And let's take a few super chats we got. And guys, how I'm going to structure this, we'll take one here for the foreign policy. Then at the end of the show, so if you have more super chats, please send them in. A rant from Pam Hyde. Any idea where Japan and Korea will fit into the New World Order? I don't think they want to be under China's umbrella. Maybe tag along with Russia and their new Arctic trading routes. It is interesting because I do see Trump almost making this like a 3-power world where we basically tell Russia what we do in North America is our business. We'll let you do what you want over there. In China, you could do what you want in your area. What do you see about Japan and Korea? They have a huge demographic problem, by the way.
Yeah, the Koreans, South Koreans, they just ain't having any babies. It's like 0.6. But you know what? There's a maps. If you go look, there's a guy. He wrote The Clash of Civilizations. Thomas. I can't think of the last name now, but it's called The Clash of Civilizations and the remaking of the world order or something like that. It was written in the early 1990s, and he has maps about how the world will be divided, and it's pretty spot on. Japan and Korea, they'll kind of just be allies with America, but also play both ways. They'll have strong relations with China and strong relations with Australia. There's going to be these sort of middle grounds, kind of like what Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, all those former, what we used to call captive nations back in the 1980s, those countries, they're going to end up in sort of this middle ground, sort of the buffer zone between Russia, their Colossus to the east, and the Europeans. I think that's really what it's going to be, And look, Trump's a big fan of Japan and of Abe, the guy who was assassinated, the prime minister, and his economic plan. Besson is a guy who believes in Abenomics, So, they're going to print a shitload of money. They're going to spend a lot of money to reorganize the economy. People look at Japan's somebody pointed this out on Twitter. They said, all the problems that we look at with Japan and say it's having economic problems, but what real people are experiencing has been a 30% increase in their purchasing power. In other words, the people are living better, which is the point of economics,
Right.
And so I think, I think that's the way it's going to go. I think, China will be the big boss in Asia, but the Japanese will have a big role, and the South Koreans, who knows with them? Who knows? Maybe Trump's friend in North Korea will start talking about making South Korea its 51st state,
That could happen. Morgoth, 009, thank you, $12. Who even are you, Z-Man? Like, introduce yourself. My apologies, I should have done this. I thought everyone knows Z-Man, because I'm a big fan. Briefly, you want to just kind of introduce yourself? I guess I should have started the show this way.
Yeah, I've been writing for, 2025, so a dozen years now. I've been doing a podcast for probably 8 years, something like that. And, I that's about it. My real life job is a business consultant. I'm a software developer and a financial analyst, and sometimes part-time controller, and if you pay me enough to do it. And but my politics is my side job. It's my side hustle. And for $5, that's the only answer you get. And if you send us $10, then I'll give you a longer answer.
He gave us 12. So that.
Oh, 12. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, then, all right. Well, I have to think about something else to say. So.
Yeah. No, he's a good supporter. And thank you guys for that. Robert, $3. This is domestic policy. We're on there. And but Z-Man, the phenomenon of the media said that the violence came to the black community. Violence descended upon Baltimore. In your opinion, is the media implying it's a spray or mist? Where did this violence come from? It's funny because I brought this up. It's interesting how they always use the passive voice of violence. That black communities are just plagued by this violence. Like it comes down like a Star Trek episode. It's an alien force that's attacking black people. It's so racist. Did you notice that? I guess.
Yeah, I always like is gun violence. Like, all of a sudden a bunch of guns got together. Like, I was going to shoot some black people.
No. Yeah, it's the euphemisms they use to try to hide the facts of. I hate the term race realist, but I don't know what to say. Everywhere I've ever lived, I used to live in Tulsa. There's an area of Tulsa that's majority black, North Tulsa, and the rest is white. Take a guess. Take a guess where all the murders are. I bet you could probably guess, right? So it's that way everywhere. You start to see patterns there. So
Yeah, it's funny. Oh, did you see the? This is way off topic here, but did you see the pictures of the Detroit where they had the main broke and there's like 3 feet of ice now on the streets. I mean, cars are frozen in place. It's like
no, I didn't see that.
That's hilarious. I mean, it's not hilarious. It's terrible, but all of a sudden, all these neighborhoods are now. I mean, there's like 3 feet of ice on the streets and the yards and everything else. But I mean, this is. Look, there's an old reversion to the mean. Things come back to their natural state. And a place like Baltimore, Detroit, or wherever, they're going to be what the human capital says they are. And you look at a place like Baltimore. I moved for a lot of reasons, but when you spend time there, you could see that it's on the brink. Something happens and it will never recover. Like New Orleans, the hurricane of New Orleans, it never really recovered.
Right.
And that'll happen there. And it's because, if you left those people to their own devices, they'll be sitting on logs, wearing loincloths and throwing rocks at each other. That's because that's the best they've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, I did a video like 2012 years ago, but in Tulsa, there was a murder in North Tulsa, the chicken hut. It was, I know it's so cliche. It's fried chicken hut, small place, and they would line up at night to buy their chicken. And there was a violence struck and someone shot someone else. And I guess it was so shocking because that didn't stop the sale of chicken or people standing in line to get their chicken. They just literally walked over the body to get their bucket of chicken. That was in the chicken hut. It's a true story. I actually went to the place afterwards just to check it out. And yeah, it's just a different, people are different in the world. Even different ethnicities, they react different. And obviously in the suburbs, women be screaming and crying and, but in North Tulsa, we're not going to stop me from eating my chicken tonight just because Leroy got shot. So,
well, that soft language about, violence is plaguing this poor neighborhood, or there's another incident of gun violence. People often make the mistake of thinking that they use this kind of language to trick us, the rubes. No, they use it on each other because, like that guy who started crying in Munich, they're so sensitive and they're so terrified of reality that when they actually have to face up to it, they just can't. So they make up these crazy euphemisms, and it's a weird thing. I've seen it up close, and I don't understand it. I grew up in a very poor. I grew up around black people. I've known a lot of black people in my life. I lived in Baltimore for a long time, and black people are the most race realist people you ever want to meet in your life. Yeah. I mean, they're shockingly so sometimes, and it is just what it is, and that doesn't. I mean, just because you acknowledge reality doesn't mean you hate reality. It just means you acknowledge it. The opposite of hate is not, or love is not hate. I mean, these are not opposites. Indifference is the right approach to a lot of this stuff, but they can't bring themselves to do it. And that's why they're all, right now they're probably all having therapy sessions. What was the name of that guy, the crybaby at Germany? Was he like the minister or something or other in Germany?
Yeah, I forget his name, but it was just ridiculous. He started to speak about how great Zelenskyy was and how mean Vance was. And then he just started to break apart and cry. And I was like, oh my God.
I just imagine it on one of those couches with the woman putting the wet cloth on his forehead,
Yeah, he's got the vapors. He needs a fainting couch. He has PTSD now because of that, I'm sure. And it's people live differently, and if you've ever been in different areas, you see they live differently. And like if that would have happened in the suburbs, all these white women would need to go to therapy forever. But they're in the hood, man, they're probably just having fun. It's not upsetting them. I mean, they didn't know the guy, so what the hell? They want their chicken. I know that sounds weird, but I can kind of understand how they think. It's just, it's different. And we always assume people think like us, and that's a big mistake. Tony, $3. What is everyone's view will be Trump's impact most felt? Will it be foreign policy stuff, immigration, or spending? Great question, Tony. What do you see and we'll just pivot into domestic. We won't have much time to do domestic, but next week we'll get into it.
Yeah.
What do you see as big hitter? Because there's been big things with immigration. He solved like the border overnight on that bit. I would like to see him deporting more, but hey. And then we have the whole Doge thing that I think, well, I don't understand, Z-Man. I've worked in business for a long time myself, and I'm hearing things that's coming out of the government that I said, this can't be real. They can't be spending money with no code or no comment or no tracking. How in the hell do they keep their books? It's like they don't keep books. I'm like, what's happening here? That just shocks me, and it seems to be shocking Elon Musk too. And it's like, what have you guys been doing? What have the managers been doing? Elon Musk goes in there and his big balls kid, and in 1 week they're like, why are we paying a check to someone that's 350 years old? I mean, what were the managers doing of these departments? I guess you've interfaced with the government. What's going on there? Am I a misunderstanding? Did they not have accounting practices? Are they lazy, incompetent, all of the above? What's happening?
It is an impossible system. I'll tell you, a story. The first time I got a government contract, and I didn't realize what was involved. I just figured, well, how hard can it be? Lots of people have government contracts.
I've had a government. I know. Yeah. Go ahead. Jeez.
So, and of course, I found out, I had to get a security clearance. I was like, all right, this is nuts. I mean, I wasn't doing anything top secret. This is just regular work. So. But then I found out actually getting paid by the government turned out to be extremely hard. It was almost impossible. But then someone from the government contract aid, I forget what it was, calls me and or emails me with a Gmail account, which I thought, okay, this is kind of odd. But I knew this person was real because my contact said he would be contacting you. So then we talk on his cell phone. So it's not a government phone. He says, look, there's a guy in Northern Virginia. He'll take care of this stuff from you, and we'll put a management fee on your contract. You'll have to redo it to cover his expense, and he'll get this all taken care of for you. I'm like, okay. So I call this guy. Sure enough, he's a fixer. That's basically what he is. He's a fixer. He's like, oh yeah, Dave's a friend of mine. We play golf and all this stuff, So the guy in the government knew that the government system was so screwed up that this thing that I was doing for them, that this agency needed, they couldn't get unless this other guy who knew how to, he knows how the system worked. And this was the same problem that the Soviet Union had. The Soviet Union, they couldn't run anything without the black market, without fixers and all this stuff. That is really where our government is right now. It's so incompetent. This is my first glimpse at government computer systems. They were, first of all, they were using a proprietary software that was written for them in the 1970s. That was the first clue there was going to be a problem, right? I mean, in the 1970s, I was on a big wheel, okay? That just, so I'm thinking, wait a second. The person who wrote this is dead. We know that. And his children might be dead too. We don't know. But they would take stuff off a screen, and the girl would then enter it into a spreadsheet on the other side and then send that along, and eventually it ends up in a database. There might have been 5 or 6 people involved in taking data out of a system that couldn't be integrated and finally putting it in a database. And you just look and you go, this is hopeless. This is make work. These people aren't doing anything. It's activity. It's not work. It's all over the government. But the thing is that there's no incentive to do anything about it until now. Now, all of a sudden, there is a lot of incentives. People are getting fired. That'll incentivize a lot of people. But I worked with a woman who was a temporary in the government for 23 years. She had been on a temporary contract for 23 years as a government employee. Now, she didn't get paid any more or less than she would have been paid. It's just there was a 10% agency fee to the company that contracted with the government to put these temps in. I mean, it's just all kinds of lunacy like that. I've done a lot of payroll systems in my life, big complicated payrolls like union payrolls. And in theory, like all of our payroll systems that I've ever worked on, check to make sure that it's a valid Social Security number. That's not a hard thing to do. The government doesn't do that. The government does not check to make sure it's a valid Social Security number. It's like, so what happens is that if you were hiring people who've got problems with their Social Security number, they're illegal aliens, you don't worry about it. You have to break your system, your payroll system, so that you can put this person on the payroll and send it up for FICA taxes and all the other stuff. It's completely nuts. I mean, I imagine, I think Elon Musk is probably losing sleep at night because I don't think he was prepared for this.
I wasn't prepared. I knew that there's a lot of corruption. I've worked with the government. It's very slow. They have to have a meeting for everything. It doesn't move. But I could imagine, I'm thinking, my God, I've always been honest my life. I probably could have been sending invoices to government
Yep.
agency, Ramsey Paul Consulting Service, $100,000. Okay. I mean, it's just crazy, everything we're
It
seeing
had
here.
it happened to me. My this contract I had, they just kept sending me checks, and I finally, I started calling and say, look, if I cash it, it's a problem. You need to stop sending me checks. And it was a hassle to get them to stop doing it. Eventually it stopped, but I could have just been cashing them and nobody would have, if I hadn't complained, nobody would have said anything.
The question was good, though, and I like this question. What will be, you think, Trump's best? What will he be remembered for this term? The foreign policy, immigration, the economy, the whole Doge stuff, or ending DEI? I mean, there's been so much. What do you
Yeah.
think is going to be his number one thing people remember him for?
It's kind of probably dependent upon where you are in things. I think, the foreign policy stuff might stick out because that's going to have a real long reaching effect. That's going to change how every president does things. But I say that, but I think, it's the stuff that's going on with the Doge and blowing up USAID and all this stuff. He's forcing a reevaluation of government that we haven't seen. It's overdue. I mean, I'm starting to call Trump the bookend to FDR, because all this crap that started with creating agencies and having managers and all the other junk, and Congress not actually passing laws, but instead telling agencies to create rules, that's starting to come to an end, because the courts are doing this too. The courts are starting to crack down on this. So we might look and say that in the long run, that Trump was kind of the great FDR experiment in managerial government, rule by expert. And we go back to Congress passing budgets that people can read, and that have legislation that says, yes, we are going to ban light bulbs. If they want to ban a light bulb, they're going to ban the light bulbs, not have some creepy agency do it through back doors and tricks. Oh, notice the light bulbs are back, by the way. The incandescent bulbs are showing up on shelves again. And,
Yeah, and plastic straws. So
yeah.
California, they'll have plastic straws.
Do you know Trump has a warehouse full of incandescent bulbs?
I did not know that.
Yeah, I fell in love with him all over again. I have cases of incandescent bulbs myself in my basement. I have a lifetime supply of incandescent bulbs.
I love them too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Trump, he's come under obviously a lot of criticism, and a lot of it I think is tongue in cheek. He knows how to troll people. He gave that Napoleon quote that caused everyone to get the vapors, and then today he saw something and he says something like, "It's good to be king" or something like, "Oh, he thinks he's king." And it's so funny. He's always has them on their back of the heels. But I do think he's trying to establish more of a strong presidency. You write a lot about the managerial system and how Nixon was really the last president that really had tried to have control of the executive branch. And by the way, I admire what you say about Nixon, because I've listened. If you guys haven't listened to the old Nixon interviews, Nixon, he had his issues, but the man was really smart. He was a smart guy. And he's very intelligent.
That would be a good topic for a show, actually, talk about Nixon.
Yeah, what? So, yeah, we could do that. Yeah, he was, because we're close to the same age. I remember he was so hated in the 70s. You guys don't probably remember. You think people hate Trump? Oh, boy, they hated Nixon. In fact, I used to have this book as a kid called the Book of List. I don't know if you remember that, but they listed all the books. Yeah, who are the most hated people in history? And Nixon finished number one above Hitler back then. I was like, wow, really? Nixon? What did he do exactly? But boy, the hippies, the type, they just hated the guy, and that's where you had the heroic journalist, Bernstein, or whatever that guy was. And it was all...
I used to play, when I was a kid, I used to play competitive chess, and it was like a local club sort of thing. And there was this older guy who was really smart. He was a very good chess player, but every time he heard the word Nixon, he would just go crazy. So I'm playing chess with him. Somebody had told me this, and I started talking about how much my parents love Nixon and all this stuff. I mean, the guy was so beside himself. I easily beat him. And he got so angry, he just stomps off. I'm like, that was great.
I know. I sometimes play chess before I go to bed. I have a chess app. I'm horrible at chess, just disclaimer, but I like to play it. And I was reading about chess, and that can throw people off the game. In the 19th century, there was a famous, I gotta forget his name, but he lost a match because his wife came in at the same time as his mistress. And he did one of the it was it. I was watching the all-time blunders in professional chess master history, and he just totally missed a move, and he had his like rook and king forked by a knight. He didn't even see it because all this came in. It was just hilarious. But yeah, that was crazy.
But no,
Yeah.
good question though. I mean, because I don't know. There's so much he's doing. I mean, look, taking out the blob, hitting USA. I am so impressed with that. There's not a lot of people who really understood how this network of money and all this stuff worked. And I
Oh
keep
my
wondering
God! Did you see it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who inside the Trump world has figured this out? They went. I mean, look. They went. It's like Star Wars, where they found that hole in the back of the Death Star.
Yeah.
And they blow it up. That's what they found. They found the Death Star's vulnerability. It was amazing. I want to know who the insider was, because that guy knew something.
They came in day one and attacking the USAID, and that was brilliant. And because they understood that was the funding. And I was going to say, did you happen to see? I have an LLC. It's just a common thing. Ramsey Paul LLC. I won't get into it, but it's no big deal. But did you see Bill Kristol? How many LLCs and shit that guy has? It looks like a drug cartel. It's like you could just do your whole. It's like the FBI. They're trying to figure out a crime and all the connections and the organized crime. It's hilarious. It's incredible.
When I saw that, I didn't realize it was Bill Kristol. I thought somebody was explaining money laundering, because that's how money laundering works.
No, they do. Well, and that's how they got away with it. And you described that a lot on one of your shows. Is like the first thing that USA aid would give to may not be that bad. Then corporations donate to it, and then they give a portion of their money to an NGO, which may give money to someone else. And trying to figure this all out is so complicated. And I think that's by design, how they set it up that way.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Gates was actually funding Antifa rioters in Louisville, but he didn't know it, because he was giving to something called the bail fund, because he thought, it helps people who were poor be able to post bail. But it turned out that through a series of complicated things, they wound up funding this husband and wife team who showed up in Louisville at the Breonna, whatever her name was, riots, with a U-Haul truck full of weapons and handed them out to the rioters. So Bill Gates rented the U-Haul truck and the weapons. I mean, but he didn't do that. He thought he was being Mr. Good conscience, nice, generous white man. And it turned out that, he's funding rioting. And I look at it happens a lot. And I would bet that there's, at this point, given what we've seen, I would bet that there's Trump people contacting all these banks and big companies. They all have charitable giving divisions, and talking to them and saying, you need to know where your money's really going. The whole drain the swamp business now takes on a whole new meaning. They really are going after the money. Look, that's why they're in the Treasury Department, and that's why they're now in the IRS. They want to know where the money's going. And, look, I mean, I haven't been to Washington since this has started happening, but I know somebody who lives there. It works in one of the think tanks. And he told me, he says, everyone's terrified. He says, it's just panic, pandemonium. He doesn't care. He's got a regular job. This is something else he's doing as a side gig. But he says, all these people, they're all frantic. They don't know what to do. They think they're all going to get fired tomorrow. And I'm thinking, man,
they should. I mean, they should.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said, if you ran a private corporation like the government runs things, you go to prison. I just, like, where would this $10 million go? It's blank. There's no explanation. I don't know. I'm like, really? That's your answer? You don't know? I mean, it's just, I really think Elon Musk was shocked, because if you're in the private world, you just can't run your books that way. But the government, whatever.
It's what he said, basic controls. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Look, I've been helping a company basically as like a controller, helping them get their books in order. And they had a bad accountant that they worked for them. They had a lot of problems, and so I had to do an audit over 5 years. And it's a lack of controls. That's really all it is. And this is basic stuff. And the owner, he understands this. New owners. And well, anyway. And I'm thinking about this. I'm like, this is stuff that every American business understands, the idea of basic controls. Well, if it's a large enough company that, this person has authorization to sign checks to $5,000, and then any more that has to go up a level and up a level. You have all these rules, and yet none of those rules existed. And I think that a lot of ways Musk, in ways, it's probably useful to have all these young guys in there because they don't have any preconceived notions. They're just looking at it purely theoretical. This is how it's supposed to work. And of course, they're like young people having seen some horrible event. They're scarred for life. Big balls will never be the same. We'll hear a year from now he's in therapy.
Yeah, and you said something I've always wanted to be this way. There's been a lot of these old fogies that can hardly move, like Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, and these guys, some of them aren't even old enough. Hillary said they're not even old enough to rent a car, and I'm like, well, young people can be smart. That doesn't bother me at all, really. Yeah. I think we should respect young people if they're talented. I think sometimes you're the smartest when you're young. You don't have the experience, but just in pure intellect, you can be quite sharp.
When I was big balls age, he's 25, I got put in charge of a $40 million operation, which and then money is probably on $100 million now. And my boss at the time said, look, you don't know anything. That's why I'm putting you in here. You know how it's supposed to work. You don't, I don't want, all this experience or anything. I want you to go in there and run it like you were taught. And, it actually worked out well. It was a great learning experience, but you don't learn until you do it, right? That's what happens. I mean, and these guys they're learning important lessons, learning all kinds of stuff. I don't see any problem with it. I mean, young people get put into big, tough positions all the time. Look, 25-year-olds are leading men in combat. I mean, right. And not just a platoon either. They're leading, they're organizing thousands of men. I mean, 25 is Alexander the Great was 18 years of age when he crossed the Mediterranean right through the Hellespont, right? So, I think big balls will be fine.
Yeah, I think so. And a super chat. Didn't Nixon win the popular vote by a huge margin? Yeah, he did. I was too old to vote. I was too young to vote, but he was actually popular when he ran.
That was a huge landslide in 72. Yeah, here's a story. I learned. I was 6 years old when Nixon ran in 72, and I kept hearing the news say there was going to be a landslide if he won. And I said to my father, I said, how I thought landslide was like a mountain falling over. And my father laughed so hard he almost hurt himself. And he actually explained to me what a landslide. I still remember him stacking up cards and saying a landslide election is when you stack up all the votes and they tip over like a landslide. That's almost 50 years ago. I still remember that. It's like one of my earliest memories. And thanks to Dick Nixon.
Yeah. He was popular. And then one more, Morga, thank you. Who would win in a fight, Rams, Z-Man or Rams? Boxing in the ring. Oh, Z-Man. He's younger and he's at the strong Slav quality. So,
well, see, it could be like Ali and Frazier. You got the height and the reach on me, but I got that the tight.
I would have to. I'm old enough. You might remember this too. People our age remember the rope the dope. Remember that Muhammad Ali used. He just kept going in the ropes until the dope got. Muhammad Ali, he was kind of funny. He has some quips that were kind of I kind of liked really. So
the only problem would be is that at my age, I don't know if I'd make it the first round. I think I might not even get up into the ring.
I think we would both give up. So yeah, that is the thing. So.
And not to mention, the audience would be horrified seeing me in trunks with no shirt on.
Yeah, it would be that'd be kind of crazy. So that is it. Well, I promise to keep it to an hour, so we'll shut down here because I know Z-Man is very prolific and tomorrow you got to read your essay tomorrow. I got to read your essay. I always read it the first thing, so I always look forward to it. And guys, so thank you so much. And again, we'll split all the super chat money and we'll be back next Wednesday. But until then, if you haven't, go check out Z-Man at your blog. And you're also, you're pretty more prolific now on X, right? I follow you and you've seen it.
I try to do 10 posts a day on X. I'm committed to it. I'm up to 4.4 million impressions on average over the 90-day period, something like that. Because if you get to 5 million, then you can set up subscriptions, and I will post my Green Door content there, just like I do at Substack and Subscribestar and all that. So.
Well, good. I try to help you and I don't give welfare tweets. I used to say, because some people would send me, would you retweet me? And I'm like, well, if you're interesting, I will. Otherwise, no. But I do that a lot to you because you put a lot of thought in some of your posts, and so that's pretty good. So follow him on.
I'm kind of
Go
bad
ahead.
at social media. You know, there's like a skill of being good at social media. I just post whatever's on my mind, so which is really not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to like tweet at famous people and all this, and I don't do it. I just
Yeah, I don't work the system. I just as a disclaimer, I'm probably the only one out there who has not got U.S. aid money. I never got any, and I don't get paid when I get monetization from X, but I don't get paid to push a certain point of view. But some people, they do this engagement farming. You've probably seen this, like, I'm tired of socialism. If you agree, retweet. I'm like, oh, come on. You know what I mean? This is like, it's just
yeah,
so obvious.
I'm still upset that the Russians came to Lauren Chen and rather than me. I just will not get over that. Here I am, Slav. I got a bigger audience than Lauren Chen, and gave her, what was it, $10 million? And
Yeah, and they gave like Tim Pool. She'd give him like 10,000 a video, and it would be just like a video get like 600 views. It was really bizarre, and so it was weird.
yeah,
And I'm
my
like,
cat's
wow.
that's pretty good up. So there you go. You guys can see my cat.
Oh, that is so cool. I've talked to you in Amran, and is that just a regular cat or is that a jungle cat?
This is an Aussie cat, and he's a little guy, but he's my perpetual kitten. So
Sasha, my wife, you met her. She's a big cat fan. I love the dogs, but I like cats too, so that's pretty cool.
I like all animals. I'd have a menagerie
I do
if I
too.
could get away with it.
Yeah, that's it. So, guys, thank you so much for being here. Z-Man, it's great. I'll see you next week. But man, have a great show. And follow Z-Man. He's great. It was a great show. Thank you guys. We had 1,100 people on, so that's great right now. 1,156 watching now. So, thank you all, and
All right,
I will talk to you guys later. Bye bye.